because of curiosity. I'm just riddled with anxiety. I'm the lowest level as a matter of fact.
Hi, Dr. Locke. Thanks for talking to me today. Could you introduce yourself?
Okay. I'm Professor Emeritus from the University of Maryland at College Park. I was partly in psychology. My main department was the College of Business and Management. I was there for 34 years.
And so the reason I'm talking today is because I know about your goal setting theory about having wider goals and setting sub goals to achieve those. But what I'm really interested to talk to you about is like how those could be applied to creative thinking, or well, even what is creativity? Maybe to start a discussion, well, how would you define creativity?
Well, I guess recombining things in a new way.
Yeah, I agree with that, but more, I think more as conceptual reorganization. How could, when I think of creativity, at least artistic creativity, say, writing a novel, it would seem that setting a goal, even sub goals, can be a bit difficult because your inspiration, even day to day, could vary, and even your motivation to write each day could vary. So, what way do you think you could set goals in a way that could make you a better creative thinker in,
Well,
say, writing?
I guess to start with, you have to decide what domain you're going to work in. You know, is it traffic control, media, programming, selling deodorant, starting a company, running taxis, opening a restaurant? You gotta choose your domain first of all, and then you have to get some knowledge through conscious thinking and experience about the thing you're going to use as your domain. So that's where you would start. For instance, if you want to learn to be a writer, first thing to ask yourself, do you have anything to say anyone would want to listen to?
Yeah.
Is it fiction or nonfiction?
Well, I was thinking the case of fiction in particular, where you have to use your imagination to come up with something that does not exist.
Well, but you still do it by observing reality.
True.
You know, Ayn Rand's first novel was about Russia.
Yeah.
Although it wasn't literally autobiographical, but it was based on experience that idealized. And of course, her goal was to write in a way that she could project the ideal man. So she had to think of what would be ideal, and she had to think of a philosophy from which she could identify the ideal. Then she had a domain in which she was going to write. So she had to learn in her first novel about architecture. So, you know, all of those things. So it's a lot of work, and to learn to be a writer, you've got to start with little things. Like Ayn Rand wrote short stories.
Yeah.
A lot of plots, movie plans. So lots and lots of practice in writing, learning the language. She came from Russia.
The difficulty with that is like, I write on my own too. I write some science fiction sometimes, and I'm honing my craft, but I find it very difficult to, I know what materials I need to write and observe things around me, but the difficulty comes in maintaining that. My goal is saying, like, I want this, maybe I have this ideal in my mind of what my ideal novel would be like if I get to that point in skill and content, but setting the goals to get there often might seem overwhelming, and you have put off the.
When you use that as your ideal,
Yeah,
you don't even know what it would look like. So ask yourself, why do you want to do science fiction?
well, in my case, I want to project ways that technology can enhance our way of living. I mean, I know that's not quite essentialized, but what'd you say?
It's not fiction, that's fact.
Well, that's the difficulty with science fiction. I'm trying to project out from mean, that's one aspect of it, I guess. I see what you mean, but idealizing what I guess the human mind can create and demonstrating that within fiction, that's kind of the ideal I foresee.
Well, I mean, if you're going to then write strictly fiction, remember that there's thousands of people who've already done it.
Right.
I mean, I've read a lot of them, not thousands, I've read many of them. What are you going to do that's new?
Thinking about what's new would be, well, I do know a lot of science fiction that's looking out to the futures, often pessimistic. So, I mean, I could see myself breaking down the problem of like getting to that point where I even can concretize better what my ideal novel would be by breaking it down into, say, working on particular ideas, write a story about one aspect of that idea, or work on a specific skill that I know I would eventually need, say if it was a specific perspective of writing or a specific perspective of a character, for instance.
What writing have you done so far to learn your skill?
A lot of it was firsthand, just doing, just trying it. I've written a number of stories, but also observing other writers, particularly like Ayn Rand.
What stories have you written? Have you written short stories?
Mostly short stories. So the way I've thought about taking on a creative task is breaking it down into individual smaller projects and then taking those together to build up my skills to then increase my skills and think more abstractly, to say in the context of a novel. Say I've written like long short stories, but eventually I would want to write like a 400-page novel, and that takes a lot more thinking and
What
holding
about a
things in
10-page
mind.
short story? As a
Usually
start?
Can you repeat that?
How about a 10-page short story as a start?
Yeah, that works usually. And that's what I've been doing. So I think it's the right sort of strategy about breaking down tasks, and it does seem productive. The harder thing comes in, I think, once I do start to get into these more abstract ideas where I have more complex story ideas, then it's not only am I breaking down the skills, but I have to break down a whole lot of even aspects of inspiration or character development and plot development, and integrating the different themes can be very difficult because breaking down goals at that point almost seems to be, I don't want to be so specific in my goal setting that I constrain my ideas before I even test them out. On the other hand, I need to be specific enough that I'm actually making progress towards something.
You have I mean, the first thing is plot.
Yeah.
Okay. Otherwise, you got nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And so you learn to write plots usually with short things to start with.
Yeah.
You know, short stories. Then you expand on those. Then, as you say, it gets more complicated because you can't do much plot in one short story.
Yeah.
So you've got to have characters, got to have a setting, got to have events,
Yeah.
got to have characterization.
But is there any principle that would work any different in the context of making creative products like a novel versus goal setting as a workplace strategy? Is there any difference?
Well, goal
between the
setting
two?
has been used to promote creativity.
Yeah. Right. So you would say the principles are
You know,
the same. There's no really meaningful difference. It's just the context is the only difference.
I mean, one company, I think it's a 3M company, says, what's the rule? Have to be 50% new product every 5 years. I don't know. I'm making up the numbers.
Yeah.
So everyone gets to choose a topic they want to push, like tape, sticky tape,
Mhm.
which one other person did, and run with it. and then they finish that and work on another one. So you can set a goal for creativity. I mean, in writing a novel, it's not creative. It's just a copycat. So all novels are creative in that sense because they're new.
Mhm.
Then you got to think of a good story.
Yeah. Well, that leads me to another thought that a lot of creativity seems to go on subconsciously, in the sense that maybe you have like a eureka moment, like a week later, or you wake up from a dream and you have an idea clearly. It's not like they came from the heavens out of nowhere, but on the other hand,
It's because you've programmed your mind with a purpose.
right?
You can't, subconscious will not do all the work. You have to be consciously thinking and setting up a goal in your mind. And then over time, subconscious will start feeding you if you put stuff in there. And it's never going to do all the work for you.
Mhm.
Very, very difficult conscious work to write a novel, as Ayn Rand has said.
Well, how would you translate or make sure that the right information is going towards your subconscious? I know, I mean, picking a goal is clearly one way, but it's not always a direct process. Sometimes you could have a goal that you don't want to acknowledge, or something that's self-defeating goal, so to speak. I mean, how do you be sure that?
You can start with, what kind of a story would be interesting that no one else has done. You'd start with what kind of a science fiction character would be interesting that other people haven't written about,
Mhm.
and start filling it out.
It often seems that like this subconscious feeling of like a eureka moment.
It doesn't work
It's,
like that.
yeah,
It doesn't work like one eureka moment. It works like 1,000 eureka moments.
yeah, I see.
You write and you program and you learn and you connect. You'll think of more and more and more things. But it's not, you might find a eureka moment for what kind of a future that no one's thought of, but that's only framework.
Yeah. Well, when you have those moments, trying to think how to phrase this.
It's not, but it's really a series of moments because of a series of thoughts and a series of connections, and then putting it into your mind, exposing yourself to new things, waiting for a day, see what new comes out, which it will, and then putting in new conscious ideas, waiting for another connection, then writing. As you write, there'll be new connections.
I know that for most writers, or at least many writers, myself included, sometimes it's hard to know when to trust that subconscious almost intuition, because I mean, not all creative ideas are just as good as each other, even if intuitively it might seem.
Only thing to trust is it'll feed you stuff. To validate if something makes sense, you've got to use your conscious mind.
Yeah.
You can trust it to feed you because the subconscious is active. You can't trust it to be omniscient.
Yeah.
And everything that feeds you, you evaluate.
It would seem there might be a slowdown sometimes if you're in a creative process. Like if in the process of writing, sometimes an idea might suddenly come to you and you can't always evaluate it. Sometimes the words you pick are just the way they are. Like you can't evaluate each word, of course, as you're writing them at that moment. At some, like even at the higher level, I could see what you're saying, where you can evaluate whether this general plot point is a good idea before you start writing for the day. But imagine you are writing in the process, the more narrower decisions, which word to use, in what way do you think you could trust your subconscious that way?
You don't worry about what word to use when you're writing your first draft. You do not do that. You'll be paralyzed. You just write. You write. Worry about which word and logical order and integration later.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So you don't trust or distrust your subconscious. You let it feed you, and you act on it. And let's see what comes out, and then use your conscious mind to say, okay, what about that?
Okay, so the way I'm trying to centralize that in my head is a lot of the process, like you can do it in like a back and forth. They can start by generating some ideas.
Yeah,
And at some point you take a break, then
yeah,
evaluate what you've done, and then give yourself feedback. Is it working or is it not? Then
Yeah.
if it's working, you continue.
yeah. I had an idea for a novel. I don't write novels, and I'm not going to, for something. I wrote down a page of ideas for a plot. I put it away. I came back to the next day. I said, this is total crap, total garbage, and I threw it out. So that's okay. I'm not going to go back to it because I'm not going to write a novel. But that's the way writing works.
Yeah, well, that makes sense to me.
You can't assume anything you write is going to be the end all just because you wrote it.
Now I'm starting to think about, say, group creativity, say, when you're producing a movie, or often maybe screenplays have two people working on it, or even like, say, Pixar, whole teams of people with some of the art team, some of the writing, some
Yeah.
directing, but they have to integrate together.
Yeah.
In what way do you think? I mean, do you think that's just the same sort of subset as any?
Well, the difference is they can stimulate one another.
Yeah.
They have extra input, but how much it's possible to write with a partner fiction, not too many people can do it.
Yeah.
There's so many subconscious premises and metaphysical issues that might not come together, but there are some fiction writers that have worked together, not too many though. You can, once you've written something, you think it might be good, you can get somebody else to comment who's smart and be honest.
I'm trying to think of ways to use goal setting in the context of just like group projects, like whether you're making a video game or a band making an album. I mean, that always seems very difficult creative problems, but at some level, they have to come together and have the same goals and break them down the same way. Do you think they would have to break them down all the same way, or how would somebody as like, even as a band leader,
Depends if you have common interests and common knowledge and common goals. Fiction, I think, is very hard to write with more than one person involved.
Mhm.
There's so many metaphysical values involved, they have to coincide. So it would be very unusual for two people to come at it in the same way. Other people could give you an idea, or could read something you wrote and said, "This is interesting, but I think it would be better if you came at it that way." You could decide if you agreed or not. But they're not going to write it with you.
Yeah. I've often thought about ways to enhance creativity. I mean, I have a master's in psychology. Much of my interest is the psychology of creativity in both a cognitive psychology sense and even managerial type of sense. How do you promote creative thought in
It's an active
organizations?
mind. It's an active mind.
Mhm. It seems to be that's would be the most important thing. But what kind of environmental situation? Maybe not. I don't want to phrase it that way. And what kind of activities or setup can an organization have to promote that thing? Like I know some people might think that like open space is important for creative thought, or others might say that constant face-to-face is important.
Not an open mind. That's a bad concept.
Yeah.
An active mind.
Yeah.
So expose yourself to various things and see if it connects If your domain is science fiction, you already narrowed the domain. So expose yourself to different things and see if you can, what would happen if I did that? Remember, Ayn Rand said, somebody said to her, your duty to write for the good of mankind. And she said, well, what if I didn't? What if I went on strike? What if all men went on strike?
Mhm.
She hadn't even thought of that. I think she had actually a little bit, but so say, okay, can I make a novel of that? So that's what got her started. It also tied to her values of the role of the individual. It was
Yeah.
one connection was accidental.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm pretty good generally using my mind actively, but I do wonder about science promoting that in others. In what way could you educate someone to become more active with their mind, or help produce an environment where they naturally encourage themselves to have an active mind?
Well, again, it depends on their life purpose. They're in finance, going to be different than they're in selling sheets or opening restaurants or building cars or brain surgery.
Well, I mean, I guess I'm imagining if I were like the head of a creative team for, let's say it was architecture, we're making a certain style of building. Again, I can't, of course, like give everybody a psychotherapy session to help them discover their understanding of themselves and correct anything, but I'm sure there's ways we could help promote their independent thoughts and even creative thoughts. But that's like what could be done.
Well, a lot of writers start writing at an early age.
Yeah.
And a lot of writers read literature.
Well, I just mean,
there and talk to people and watch current events. So active mind means getting out there and seeing things and learning things and discovering things.
well, how could I promote that in others? And if I were on a team of people that all need to be creative, like, I mean, I could do it for myself, of course. But I mean, is there anything that could be done? And I wouldn't want to assume that what I get is just what I get with other people, that there is some way to.
Why do you want other people to be creative when you're trying to be creative yourself?
Well, at least as far as, I'm trying to think, I don't know. I guess I'm having the bias that the entire team isn't working on it, but I would think at least if I were working on, say, a movie, I can write screenplay, I'm sure, but I don't know that much, nor could I know everything I need to about like camera angles and all that.
Different because making a movie involves many specialties: costume, dialogue, scenery, photography, timing, location, all kinds of things. So usually the beginning of it would be a screenplay.
Yeah.
Right. And screenplay writer doesn't have to know all the other stuff. That's the director and the producer and the cameraman and the makeup artist to bring it into reality. So a movie is a totally different thing because it's many people of necessity are involved. So you become expert at what part you're doing. The cameraman doesn't have to write the script.
Well, let's suppose I was the prime mover in this case, that whatever you wanted to find that as, let's say, the main creative force that defines the movie. Like when people think of Steven Spielberg, like they might think him as Indiana Jones, and nobody really thinks of anything else except him. Like, he'd be the prime mover in that case. How would that person be able to spur the other creative thinkers to contribute in some other smaller ways for little things that contributes to the whole, despite being the prime mover? Even being the prime mover, they still want others to be creative to some degree to produce the best product possible.
I don't know, what others are you talking about?
Let's say, well, certain techniques maybe of the actors say that actors need to make creative decisions of their own within their acting to a degree. I mean, they don't have full control, obviously. The director has primary say, but because that even the main person that maybe
Well,
the main
usually
creative force.
people, the casting director, obviously the writer can have preferences, but it's the casting director that picks the people. So casting director has to know the script. And then of course they probably talk. The casting director usually doesn't do the plot. They have a specialty.
Right, it would start to seem disjointed though. I mean, at some point it all needs to be integrated by someone, but it would
Well,
seem like that
The
someone.
director and the film cutter, film editor, and the producer.
But how could you then assure that they're being their prime, their prime creative self? In what way, as a manager, or prime
Usually,
mover?
those people are picked because they see their work from other movies. This was brilliant photography. And there was Joe Smith, the photographer. That was great costume design in those three movies. I got that person to do costume design. So you learn from observing expertise.
And what could you do as a manager type of position to make sure it's all integrated? I mean, that seems to must be the most important thing of all.
Well, the film editor probably works with the director.
Yeah. What is there anything you could do besides just observe what they've already done, like actively within the process of this current movie, to make sure that they're
Look at their previous work.
what do you mean?
You want to pick your film editor, observe other movies they've edited.
Yeah, but it doesn't necessarily guarantee that this next one is
Well,
they're
you want
gonna
to pick somebody who did a lousy job, or somebody who
no,
did a good
but
job?
I'm saying, how do you assure that people stay on top of their game? I mean, sure, they did their great work
You can't
then.
control everybody. Every single person can't control all the people. So you do really well what you're doing. Try to find people who are on the same wavelength to work with. That's it. You can't be omniscient and omnipotent about other people. As you know, if you write a book that they want to produce, you sell them the rights. They can do whatever they want.
Yeah.
That's the chance you take if you become very powerful, like Spielberg. If you've been a genius for years and had many, many hits, you can push your weight around.
Yeah.
If you're new, forget about it. You're lucky they won't even want your script.
Yeah. It seems like maybe even just, well, and then to bring it back, the context of goal setting, like in what way is that really just a personal thing you do, or is that something that managers implement, or what's the relationship between those two?
I give them the principles and they apply them.
Or is it more like an educational thing that you provide to your
Well, I provide
employees?
stuff they can read and they'll decide how to use it.
Right, so you think it's more just educating your employees than it is about providing them rules or
Well,
whatever people it is?
in principles.
Yeah.
And then they apply them.
I mean, I would think many managers think of it as you need to give them rules and that they must obey.
But to make your goals clear as opposed to vague.
Yeah.
If you want to get a good product, give them, challenge them instead of making them really, really easy or ridiculously impossible, so they'll get discouraged. Make sure they get feedback. They can decide how to get it. There's a lot of ways to get feedback. Make sure the people they're giving goals to have the needed skills. If not, tell them to get people who are trained. So
Let
those
me
are the principles.
rephrase this in a way if I think I know what you're saying. Like, would you say that it's like any creative director, whether they're a director, like it's more about interacting with people in such a way that they feel self-efficacious, that they don't need to be told what to do, but they do it themselves?
So the director has a lot of power.
Yeah.
How they frame the whole thing, how they frame the scenes and which scenes they throw out, which scenes they want, how they want people to act in the various scenes. And I guess the writer can put an input if allowed, maybe not. So that's the director's job, to put together a picture. And then the camera crew might have an idea for how you frame it. And the costume designer might have how a certain person should be dressed. But usually the director has the ultimate power.
Yeah.
Get the final product out there. I don't know. The director must work with a film editor, I assume.
Yeah. But it sounded like you're more promoting a way of making things. Well, the usual distinction is extrinsic reward versus intrinsic reward, being that you're like,
There's three categories of awards. There's intrinsic because you love whatever writing.
Yeah.
The achievement motivation, you love reaching goals, but getting to a successful outcome. And third, you get some benefit for your life, whether money and or new skills that you learned, new people you got to know that can connect with you in the future. So the ideal career is all three together.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it seems more useful to present things in a way that's about, well, and of course you need external, but it would seem that anything intrinsic or stemming from yourself is most useful.
I mean, a person living in the real world wants all three. Loving the action itself isn't enough because supposing you're no good at it.
I guess
Or supposing nobody will pay you to do it. So you need all three to live your life.
Yeah, you got to be integrated.
If you're missing one of them, then that's an unfortunate thing. It's undermining you. For instance, if you are very good at something and you hate it, it can make for a miserable life.
Yeah.
Or if you're very good at something and they won't pay you, you better find somewhere else to work because you'll starve.
Yeah, it needs to be integrated as a whole. Like you can't divorce them from each other. I mean, that seems like a just useful way to think about it. I mean, I think we'd imagine even some creative directors just think of it in terms of you just give the employees extrinsic, or somebody else might think you only allow them intrinsic, but a proper look might be that you speak in a way that models the right behavior and offers it.
Director loves directing, obviously, but they want the movie to succeed. They want the package to come out, so that's achievement motivation. Yeah. And they're certainly going to get paid because that's what directors do. They get salaries. They don't work for free. They want all of the above. And of course, if they do well, the movie sells, they can get other work later. So all three are the ideal life.
Yeah. How have you experienced creativity? I mean, even as a scientist, you need to be creative. I mean, what sort of things do you think fed best to your creative thinking?
I don't know that I went to any particular place. I don't know that my work is creative as with a novelist, but I was always thinking of, okay, we found experiment 1 to do that. But why don't we do experiment 2 to find out something else? Let's do experiment 3 to find out something else. And then after lots of other people did it, how can we put that together in a model? And then I read somebody else's theory. which is about motivation, said, what if that theory of motivation connects anyway to what I'm doing? Should we incorporate that concept into what we're doing? So I did that too.
What way do you think you were able to keep yourself thinking creatively? Or, I mean, don't imagine you always thought this way. I mean, in what ways did?
Well, I love writing. I'm good at it. That got me many, many raises. I didn't work for prizes at all, but I got lots of them. And when I retired 20 years ago, of course, I'm getting retirement salary. Still getting, but I can still do some writing because I like doing it and I'm good at it. So I kept doing it.
Yeah.
I did publish some books, so I got royalties for that. So things I love and getting rewards.
When you were younger, especially though, do you, like, maybe just starting your career, like, in what ways do you think, or what sort of ways did you set up yourself for success?
I had no idea what to start with.
Yeah.
Okay, then I read in a book that my professor wrote. There's a study in the book on one page of a goal setting experiment done in 1935 in another country. And I said, well, this is 1960. Motivation now is dominated by behaviorism, which is conditioning. That's no good. Dominated by Freud, which is instinct. That's no good. That's not a way to do it. And it's dominated by human relations. And that says if you make your people feel good, it'll automatically produce. And I said, that doesn't work. It's too simplistic. So here's a study that shows another way to approach it. Let's try it out. I did my dissertation and it worked. But okay, let's keep doing it.
Yeah, do you think
because it worked? Lots of people started doing it because here's an idea that actually we can trust. So we had hundreds of people doing it, and I could put it all together. So that's how it worked.
Yeah, how do you think you could kept yourself being able to maintain output over your career?
I didn't have to get myself. I left it.
So I mean,
I used to say it was like a baseball player I read about. He was an all-star, and he was a professional baseball player. He was an all-star. He said, "I can't believe they pay me to play a kids game." And he was very good at it. And I thought many years later, I said, "That's exactly what I think. Can't believe I'm having a career where they pay me to do something I'm really good at and I love doing." I didn't have any conflict.
I mean, do you think that was?
And I was successful.
I mean, I guess. I mean, of course, it's difficult sometimes. I mean, to put in the effort, but clearly it's worth it. But how do you make sure that, at least maybe problems I've run into, like that are only temporary, not like long-term problems, is that it sometimes seems like the only way I can do it is in academia. And like, I want to research things, but it's not always academia. Isn't always the most welcome.
Probably not a place for a writer to get a job now.
Yeah, but even as a psychologist, like, academia is not always welcome to the way I like to do science.
What would be your specialty in psychology?
Cognitive psychology, memory, and creativity would be my main interests.
Well, when I go into academia, you have to do studies, quantitative studies.
Yeah.
Publish them. If you don't get tenure. You better make sure you can do it and you love it. Otherwise, you're out of a job.
Yeah.
Also, you should know, I don't know if you care, psychologists are about 95% left wing. You don't have to talk about philosophy with them. You can keep to yourself. But the atmosphere is very left wing. And they're going to want you to study racism, and sexism and other stuff. And you don't have to. You can say, I want to study something else. They'll probably let you study other things, but that'll be the atmosphere.
Yeah. Well, even academia in general can be, even just forgetting the political views. I mean, even the way of doing science isn't like, I always like to do things more inductively and kind of like see what happens sometimes.
Well, I did induction and I succeeded at it.
Yeah.
It's true the journals want deduction a lot.
Yes.
I did induction, and it worked for me. Worked better than the people who did deduction. But it's
Yeah.
true in journals demand that you have a theory before you have a theory.
Yeah.
Then you state hypotheses deducing from the theories which doesn't exist yet, but you pretend it does. Then you test it. Then you say, okay, the theory was true. You succeeded. But of course, one study doesn't prove a theory at all.
Yeah.
But if you do enough of those, you get tenure.
Yeah. I mean, I ran into that sort of issue with I did my thesis and it was fine for the getting my master's and all that. But it wasn't like I was testing a theory, but more so than anything, I was trying to develop a theory, taking up some additional existing thoughts, but still doing experiment and trying to gradually develop a theory over
How do
time.
you develop a theory from one experiment?
Well, it'd be a one step.
You're gonna develop an idea to
Right.
pursue. You do one study. Okay, this idea got me some success, and then of course you can expand and be what's called programmatic.
Yeah. I mean, it could just be all hypothetical, deductive, but then, which is kind of what how I had to do it. But, and of course, I would be gradually, I wouldn't develop a theory just from one experiment, but it often seems like academia wants you to strictly operate from a existing theory. And if it doesn't work, then create a new one, rather than just developing theories from your observations.
Theory building is done in a completely stupid way, completely wrong. And my career was based on building inductively for 50 years.
Yeah.
That's not the way most psychologists work. They develop a theory before the first study. And they say, okay, correct theory. But that's not a theory building process.
I know.
That's one thing, and they don't expand and generalize. And many doctoral students, you should know this, many doctoral students do the dissertation because they have to. They don't want to. They have to. And then they publish it when they go for their first job, maybe get 1 or 2 articles, then they got a couple more, then they may get tenure and stop.
Yeah.
They have tenure, so they're safe.
Yeah.
So they don't do programmatic because they don't want to.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it seems like the inductive process is creativity. Like there isn't much difference.
Science works by induction.
Yeah.
That's how it works. You build a theory. Once you've built it, you can then deduce. Okay, based on what I know, if I do this, this will happen.
Yeah.
Based on my inductive conclusions.
Yeah.
But if you start with theory based only on deduction, based on theories which are also deductions, I think it's really stupid.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the way a lot of psychologists work.
Yeah. Where do you get most of your ideas from regarding that? I mean, I ran clearly for regarding induction, that is.
And then I say, okay, let's do it with one task. Let's do it with another task.
Yeah.
Okay, so you change task. That's one change. And then what about the duration? The duration of the activity.
Mm-hmm.
And what about long-term versus short-term goals? So what if we add that in? What about commitment? Can we measure commitment? How do we measure commitment? How about, then I read about self-efficacy. How could self-efficacy affect how you respond to goals?
Mm-hmm.
How could self-efficacy affect how you respond to feedback? So it gets expanded.
Yeah. And it
So
seems
I
almost,
never had a problem thinking of new studies.
yeah. I mean, that way of thinking, well, of course, it stems from Aristotle, but I've been thinking about how to,
Of a good book to read, Making of the Atomic Bomb.
Yeah.
Because the physics work started about 1900s, early 1900s, discovering what the hell is the atom? What the hell is it? What's a molecule? How are molecules and atoms related? How's the atom constructed? What's it made of? Are there different kinds of atoms? And then are there different kinds of what do you call it? Minerals in the universe? Is their atomic structure different? And then how does that relate to their energy? And through hundreds of studies like this, people came to see that atoms, if combined in a certain way, release energy. And then at the atomic bomb, then they had to figure out, okay, how do we implement what we knew into making a bomb? It was quite probably a 40-year project where they got thinking, actually, they can make an atomic bomb. So they knew a lot, but that particular product required a tremendous amount of knowledge. So the making of the atomic bomb, which I can only partially understand, gives you the entire background in terms of the individual discoveries that made it possible. So that's way, way more complex than what I did.
yeah. Is there any particular psychologists that inform any of your ideas or where?
My
You're-
best, my most recommended psychologist is Albert Bandura.
Who's he? I don't recognize the name.
He's, I think, the most famous living psychologist. He, his main concept is self-efficacy, the conviction that one can perform, and how that affects your performance.
Yeah.
And he also has role modeling, which is how another role model can affect your motivation and what makes that possible. How people respond to feedback because of self-efficacy. How people respond to failure. So there's a whole program of, he's got 2 whole books, 1986, 1997. Second one's just on self-efficacy. So, and he's an anti-behaviorist, which was very rare because he was anti-behaviorist in the 1960s and I was too, and there weren't too many of us.
Yeah.
So I'm a good admirer of his. In fact, I've even worked with him.
What university was he at?
Stanford.
Hmm.
He's emeritus now. He's about 93,
Hmm.
still writing.
Yeah. What kind of psychology output do you do now? I mean, what kind of, I mean, I know you're retired, you said, but
Still working on some on goal setting. And I'm doing some more in other kind of journals and some more. But I've written some books. I wrote a book on free will recently. I wrote a book with Ellen Kinner on romance. And now I'm writing some books on making observations on the political scene because this magazine, the Capitalist magazine, will publish anything I write. Unlike other journals, like why individualism can cure racism. No other journal would publish it.
yeah. Were there other,
Like that now, but not for so it doesn't have to be evaluated by reviewers.
yeah. Were there any other psychology areas that you put a lot of time and thought into besides, say, goal setting and things like that?
Not much. I mean, motivation in general.
Yeah.
Yeah. And incentives. I've done a little bit on leadership and on groups because leaders can use goals.
Yeah.
Groups can use goals.
Yeah, those always seem.
And how goals affect how you respond to feedback. I did a lot of studies on that.
It almost seems like goals are just common sense that you need those and breaking
Well,
those
no,
sub goals.
when I started, the only motivation people were B.F. Skinner, which was conditioning,
Yeah,
and Freud, which is instinct, and the touchy-feely, uh, be a nice guy. And that was all in the motivation there was.
Yeah.
Okay. So when I started doing this, it was completely new. Okay. Because a guy from England in 1935, no one ever heard of him, except he was in this textbook. So now goal setting is widespread, and some people consider it obvious. That's because it's now been discovered.
yeah,
Like it's obvious that viruses can kill us. In 1920, nobody had discovered viruses, so it wasn't obvious. Now it is.
yeah. Do you think most of that it's from your research? Because I don't really ever hear your name in the context of cognitive psychology. Isn't it?
Well, of
But
course, I am cognitive. They do other stuff, so I don't
Yeah.
follow them.
yeah,
And they would benefit a lot from
Yeah.
understanding concepts,
yeah,
but they don't.
yeah. I mean, would you say most of that thinking about goal really thinking stems from you or other, well, your
You know,
colleague?
I've changed the field now,
Yeah,
and now everyone said, of course, goals work,
yeah,
but they didn't in 1960.
yeah. But who was part of that? Like, there's you and your
Gary
colleague.
Latham, me and Gary Latham.
Just you two? Yeah,
We were the main,
I mean,
we were the ones who built goal setting theory.
yeah, I mean,
And a few other people dabbled in it,
yeah,
but we were the ones who built the theory.
yeah. Well, I guess I could thank you for.
And Bandura incorporated goal setting
Yeah.
into his model. And we integrated self-efficacy with our model because we're on the same wavelength.
It would seem like it's almost like that's just seeped into common thinking now. Like whether or not I knew it came from you, it just seemed to just steep into.
Oh, yeah, there are probably people who don't even know that at least when I started it,
Yeah.
it's so common.
Yeah,
Nothing I can do about that.
Yeah.
And people now can discover new things because I'm inductive.
Yeah.
So our theory doesn't preclude new discoveries.
Yeah.
Inductive theory, you're screwed. You make the theory in advance, then you deduce it. If it's wrong, you're screwed. It's over.
that's true.
Inductive theory, it's open-ended.
Yeah.
So we're not threatened by new discoveries
Mhm.
because they simply add to the theory. So
Yeah.
Gary Latham has studied how goals can be primed subconsciously. And they can. I never thought of that.
Yeah.
That's part of goal theory now.
Yeah. I think that's part of my one thing I'm wondering about or expanding on for creative thinking, the way those subconscious goals and
There's no, yeah, well, you can, priming works. You
yeah,
can prime yourself. Remember the subconscious holds probably 30 trillion connections. Storage capacity, it's a storage place. So the number of things you can get out of there is quite large. And then if you program more stuff in, the number of connections is not infinite, but it's almost infinite. So the capacity for new discoveries is unlimited.
mhm. I think a
You
lot
don't,
of
you don't rediscover the wheel, you discover something new.
I think a lot of the research I want to get into is the ways in which the subconscious operates for the purpose of creative thought. I mean,
The subconscious is storage.
yes,
Okay. You can't live without storage, even
Yeah.
for one day.
Yeah.
All the knowledge you have is in there. You pull it out based on conscious purpose. Okay. When I'm conversing with you, all the word meanings I already know.
Yeah.
I don't have to look up every word in a dictionary as we talk, right? It's in my subconscious.
Yeah,
And
that's
grammatical constructions in my subconscious.
yeah,
But
it's
the subconscious
fascinating.
is not omniscient.
Yeah. But it's just fascinating to me though that um that so much information can be stored with just you only need to pull it up with your awareness, but it's
In
stored there without.
my free will book, I read a book on the brain, which is in chapter 1. And I forgot what the number is, but I wrote the number of neurons in your brain, which are the main connecting thing.
Yeah.
It was in the trillions.
Yeah.
Then there's other things, synapses connecting the neurons, and I can't even tell you all the parts. And then the brain has a complex structure. So everything's going like this.
Yeah.
In a pro-life form, so you can live.
Yeah.
So think of your subconscious as a warehouse without which you can't live. But it's not omnipotent and it's not omniscient.
Yeah.
Got to keep pushing it.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for talking.
But I wish
Very
you
interesting.
best of luck in your writing.
Yeah. Thanks. Thanks for talking.
Okay.
It was a good conversation.
Okay, good. Take care.